What's that sound?
Matthew looked around and then looked at his friend Violet. They had both stopped suddenly and were now standing perfectly still in the middle of the trail. Matthew leaned forward slightly, trying to listen. "It sounds like singing," he whispered. "Who would sing at night in the middle of the woods?"
Who would be walking in the woods in the middle of the night?
Violet muttered back. He rolled his eyes at her. "Come on, Violet, let's go see what it is. Someone could get lost out here." He tugged on the girl's sleeve. She recoiled, shaking her head.
No, Matthew, absolutely not.
She protested.
You're out of your mind. What makes you think anyone is lost here? We're not supposed to be here at all. It's late, it's cold outside, and this whole thing is a bad idea.
"You're the one who agreed," he parried, crossing his arms stubbornly over his chest. "And if you don't come with me, I'll go alone." Matthew rushed off in the direction the singing was coming from. The girl remained behind, muttering bitterly to herself.
Then do it and see if I care. You're crazy.
When she looked up again, Matthew had already disappeared completely. It had only been a minute or so since he had left. She still had to see him. However, when she looked around, there was no sign of him. Somewhere in the distance, her footsteps or any sound at all could not be heard. The trail was suddenly eerily quiet. Violet looked around and felt a chill run through her body. She froze, listening. The sweet, gentle humming filled the air again, along with the very faint sound of a music box somewhere very far away. The melody was soothing, but Violet's stomach continued to rumble, and she began to shiver. Still, she didn't utter a word or move. She stared at the road in front of her, watching and waiting, and that's when she saw it. It was a girl with white hair. She was wearing a silvery white and red Victorian dress and had a shiny crown on her head. As she got closer, Violet saw that her face, hands, and clothes were splattered with blood. Her face was pale and haggard, with dead, glassy blue eyes surrounded by deep shadows, her lips dark. It was she who hummed, her voice high and pleasant, which contradicted her anxious appearance. Violet wanted to turn and run, but she couldn't. The world around the two girls seemed to distort and grow duller, and the humming grew louder and louder. Violet couldn't take her eyes off the strange girl. Gradually Violet's panic left her body completely and she felt herself relax.
"Ah, he mentioned he brought a friend,"
the girl said quietly, smiling slightly.
Where's Matthew?
Violet managed, the sound of her voice hoarse and awkward. She felt kind of numb, and she felt like she was growing tired and weak.
"He's resting, he'll be fine."
What do you mean? He's going to be okay. Is he alive?
Violet felt anxiety pierce her chest.
"He'll be fine," she said again. "There's no need to worry."
The girl turned her back to Violet and gestured for her to follow. Involuntarily, Violet approached this girl and they walked down the path. The hum continued to grow in Violet's ears. The trees around them seemed to sway unnaturally. Everything seemed to be pulled upwards, as if it was being pulled towards the sky. Everything seemed to stretch imperceptibly, and Violet felt as if she were almost in a dream.
"What's your name?"
the girl asked.
Violet.
She replied.
And what's yours?
"My name is Annalise. Nice to meet you."
Where's Matthew? What did you do to him?
Annalise didn't answer the question. The path in front of them seemed to grow longer and longer, and time seemed to move slower and slower with each step Violet took. Her limbs seemed heavy, as if they were made of lead. She felt like she was about to collapse. Annalise gently led Violet off the path, where the forest grew denser and the trees closer together. Annalise's mooing was so loud now that Violet felt like her brain was expanding around her skull. Her vision began to blur and colors danced before her eyes. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it would explode at any moment.
"Here we are,"
Annalise said at last. Violet stopped short. There was blood everywhere, dripping from tree branches and filling the marks on the soft ground. In the center of the small area was an axe stuck into a stump. What surrounded it, however, made Violet freeze in absolute horror. She couldn't tell how many there were, but there were bodies lying around the stump. Some were recent and still bleeding, while others showed various stages of decomposition. Each was missing a head. Violet didn't dare lift her head to see if blood was actually dripping from the tree branches. "You wanted to know what happened. I thought I'd better show you," Annalise said simply. Violet could no longer bear what she was seeing and finally collapsed face down on the ground, letting the swirling inky darkness engulf her. An excerpt from a radio program a week after Violet and Matthew were reported missing. On Monday night, October 3rd, two teenagers, Violet Tyler and her friend Matthew Collins, went missing in the woods near Whitewater. We have just been informed that both have been found. Unfortunately, Matthew Collins passed away from a serious injury. Violet Tyler was found next to him and was hospitalized in a coma-like state. Doctors concluded that she had suffered a sudden heart attack and was unlikely to survive. These two are among many who have disappeared over the years in October in different places around the world under the same mysterious circumstances. May God be with you all. Annalise Elizabeth Spieral was born on October 11, 1810. She was the only daughter of Richard and Adeline Spieral. Annalise was a beautiful, beloved child from the moment of her birth. As she grew up, she developed an interest in music, so she enrolled in singing lessons and played the piano. Her childhood was a happy one. Annalise didn't have many friends, but when she was 16, she became friends with Alexander and Veronica Warren, whom she loved very much. The three of them were very close, and the depth of Annalise's love for them cannot be described in words. On the night of October 11, 1827, Annalise's 17th birthday, she and Alexander went for a walk in the woods just outside the Spieral house. After both were gone for over 4 hours, Adeline went looking for her daughter and found her brutally murdered in the woods near the house. She had been decapitated. Alexander was nowhere to be found and was immediately assumed to be the murderer. Annalise's evil spirit awoke a few days later and managed to somehow reattach her head. It took her 6 months to gain her strength, but once she did, she began luring people into the forest to experience the same thing she did. Now, since she became the strongest in the month of her death, she travels to different forests and continues to try to satisfy her angry soul.